नहीं आ रहे। अच्छा
as the chairman of this seminar, Mr. Das.
Thank you, Mr. Chauhan. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this seminar of the Asian Development Research Institute. Although the ADRI is a relatively new institute, but it has established its presence in Patna and in the intellectual life of Bihar already by organizing various discussions, seminars, research projects, etc. on matters of urgency to the people of Bihar and to the people of the world in general. In this case, it is an extremely timely seminar which has been organized on the issue of the Dunkel Draft and GATT negotiations. As you are probably aware, by tonight 12 p.m. Geneva time, which is around 3:30 our time, the negotiations which are being done in Geneva have to come to an end. This is a kind of deadline which has been set by the developed countries and by the GATT Secretariat on draft. this draft is not just an agreement which the two countries enter into. This is an agreement which is a multilateral agreement which will set the stage for world trade for a very long period of time, which will set the rules for world trade as well, which is expected to set the rules for world trade for a very long period of time, and will have very serious implications for all the contracting parties, and in fact for parties who are not members of that also. So therefore, this is an issue which is of extreme urgency. Unfortunately, in the case of India, we found that serious, reasoned political discussion on this issue has not taken place with as much urgency as the issue deserves. The very fact that the Parliament of India found time to discuss this issue only the last day, which has profound impact on our economy, our society, and even on our culture, as the French are pointing out on their cultural situation. I will have, of course, chance to talk about all these things perhaps towards the end of the seminar. For the moment, I would like to invite Mr. P.P. Ghosh to give a welcome address. And again, reiterating that this is the seminar held at absolutely an opportune time. There couldn't have been a better time to hold the seminar. And ADRI is very happy that it has received such a large response from all of you. We crave your patience. This is a complicated issue. We might have to extend the seminar slightly, but we hope that you will all be with us and go through the seminar. Thank you.
Respected Professor Mushkindule, Professor Arvind Das, Professor Suman Saha, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely happy to welcome all of you on this seminar on Dunkel Draft and its implications for the future of the economy. In difference to what Professor Das said, that is the most opportune moment, I thought I will maintain that we are slightly behind the schedule. We should have organized such seminars much before in large numbers to really know what this Dunkel Draft is and what are its implications for India in general and especially for underdeveloped regions like Bihar. On the face of it, as most people will know, not that most people will know that Dunkel Draft is a set of agreements which is supposed to direct the international trade. And this negotiations have been going for years. But as it so happens that we are going to sign it out in a very short time, and it is not really relevant now to ask whether it is good or bad, whether it is signed or not. It's almost a fait accompli. However, there are still remains questions. Once the draft has been signed, what implications these clauses and the agreement clauses will have for the Indian economy, and especially for Bihar, as I was telling you. Now, I think now we know, although I am not very sure, that the clauses that we have in the Dunkel Draft are so wide that it is a misnomer to say that it is going to regulate the international trade only. It is so wide in nature that it is going to treat many of the issues that we have been treating until now as domestic issues. It is not a question of customs duties, it's not a question of dumping, it's not a question of import duties or import concessions, etc. Many of the things like public distribution system is within Dunkel Draft. The subsidy for agriculture is within Dunkel Draft. The intellectual property rights is within Dunkel Draft. And if all these financial institutions are within Dunkel Draft, if all these things are taken into account, I wonder what is left in the outside Dunkel Draft. the most unfortunate thing about this Dunkel Draft has been that the total debate that we have had in India up till now has been extremely limited. Although the government has promised a detailed discussions on the issue as almost 1.5 years back, if I remember, or maybe longer than that, we decided to discuss it only the last week in the Parliament, and even the total time given to that is so limited, and the coverage of it, the same in the paper also is so limited, that even after it has been discussed in the Parliament, we hardly know adequately about the whole thing. Another difficulty is that we know that agricultural operations, agricultural policies, agricultural production, and the spending of seeds and peanuts, etc., is going to affect much more the state level policy decisions on agricultural system or agricultural policies. However, what we have been having up till now, the discussions is almost confined to New Delhi and the central government, and I do not, I haven't seen any reference where the state governments were consulted on what should be the implications of and how should we react to it. Even in the sphere outside government, the discussions have been extremely limited. I am particularly worried about the fact that many of the provisions of the draft, the most supporters of the argue that there are difficulties in the Dunkel draft, but there are gains as well. But if you analyze some of these possible gains, you will see that what you are supposed to lose is almost certain, and what you are likely to gain is at most a possibility. One of the arguments that was given by Mr. Pranab Mukherjee was that this next 10 years, the world trade is going to increase by $210 billion. And once India signs the Dunkel Draft, it has every chance of taking a good share of that $210 billion. But we must remember that when the increase in the prices of medicine is almost a certainty, I am not sure by what percentage India's share in the total in the world international trade will go up, which now stands less than 0.5%, less than 0.5%. So we thought that in our that we might start discussions in although rather blatantly, and this one-day seminar is a first step in that direction. We hope to continue by some other research activities as well. As regards our distinguished speakers this evening, it will be first us to introduce them. Dr. Seti, who has been our foreign secretary for years and has been in the thick of affairs of the Dunkel Draft was being discussed both in Geneva as well as in elsewhere. We have Professor Arvind Narayan Das, who has been writing, if I remember, at least 1 year, if not more, in Times of India on various aspects of that gap and the Dunkel Draft, and Professor Suman Sahai, who I heard last year she was here, we had another seminar on free market. And she has been, she of course is a professor in Hyderabad University Intelligence Department, but that apart, most interesting that as a very conscious activist, she has been leading the Gene campaign in India along with major portfolios, and we have distributed some of the leaflets which is from that organization. With these words, I welcome you all again and request Professor Das to proceed with this. Thank you.
As well as subsequent to his getting to free from the officialdom, he has been associated with the Gene campaign and other critical organizations body which have been looking at and trying to make the Indian people aware of the implications of this. I request to do it keynote address.
I think I shall begin by explaining some of the basic things regarding the local text, and then move on to bring out its implications for our economy, and then conclude by just speculating as to what can be done and what is the outcome. As you know that GATT is an organization the main purpose of which is to formulate rules of trade, to see that they are implemented, and also from time to time undertake or organize trade negotiations which are designed to bring down restrictions on trade. The ultimate goal being to achieve a freely liberal multilateral trading system. Since GATT was created immediately after the Second World War, it has organized a large number of trade negotiations. And the last one was organized, the last one which is organized is called the Uruguay Round of Trade Negotiations. The name was given as Uruguay Round because this round was negotiated, concluded and launched at a place called Punta del Este in Uruguay, where I happen to be present as one of the members of the Indian delegation. This round of negotiation was supposed to be completed in 4 years. It began in 1986 and was supposed to be over by 1990. But when even through the second half of 1991, there appeared to be no hope of its being successfully concluded with full consensus. The then Secretary General of GATT, Mr. Dunkel, which is a Swiss national and who once upon a time used to be a very good colleague of mine when we were both as delegates in GATT, he undertook the responsibility of putting together all the agreements that had been reached in the negotiations so far and suggesting his own formulation on areas where no agreement had been reached and which he thought would be the most agreeable text. And these together were called the Dunkel Draft or the Dunkel text. And this is the subject which has been the subject of wide discussion for the last 2 years, because the Dunkel text was submitted in December 1991, and now exactly 2 years after that we are about to conclude the negotiations of this subject. Now, the Uruguay round of trade negotiations differed from all previous rounds in 2 major ways. One of them was that for the first time, the victim of, or the target of this round of trade negotiations were a group of medium power developing countries. That is countries like India, Brazil, Nigeria, Egypt, Indonesia, because the idea was to open their market, to find space for the multinationals of the developed countries in the markets of these countries. And the reason why this became a major objective was that the particular stage that the economies of developed countries had reached at the time when the Uruguay round was proposed. The Uruguay round was really proposed in 1982 at the time of a GATT ministerial meeting. And that was the time when the economies of the developed countries was going through the worst crisis of the post-war era. Actually, the rate of growth in 1981 was negative, and in 1982 it was zero, almost zero. And the problems that had created this slowing down of the economies of the developed countries after almost an uninterrupted rate of growth of 5% or so per annum for 3 decades in the 50s, 60s and the 70s were of a deep structural nature. These problems required to be tackled at the social level, at the political level, at the institutional level. And very few governments of the developed countries had the political courage to bring that about. And they thought that among the means to impart a higher impulse of growth to the economy could be the markets of outside countries. And in this respect, the market of some of the medium-level developing countries appeared to them to be most attractive. So that was one objective. The other objective was that, or the other way in which the Uruguay round was different from all other rounds of trade negotiations, was that until the Uruguay round, the GATT negotiations were confined to two things. One was trade in goods, and secondly, that trade which takes place across the border. That is the transactions at the border. How much duty is levied, whether goods are being allowed to come or not, what restrictions are put on the goods. These were the subjects of GATT. But in the post-war years, the developed countries' economy, in their economy, the services came to play a very important role. And in some of the economies, the services provided almost 60 to 70% of the GNP of the developed countries. And they thought that, they were also very competitive in that. The developing countries had hardly developed their service industries. And by service industry, I mean transport, communications, banking services, the insurance services, consultancy services, tourism, and all that goes with that. And they thought that if they could, pave the way for their multinationals which were active in the service industries in the market of the developed countries, it would be a good contribution to their economic growth. And therefore they wanted to expand the mandate of GATT from goods to services. Now, along with services, they brought in two other items, and they were what has come to be known as TRIPS and TRIMS, that is trade-related intellectual property rights and the trade-related investment measures. Now, the one distinguishing feature of all these three areas, that is TRIPS, TRIMS and services, was that the transactions in these areas are not confined to what happens at the border. They impinge upon the macroeconomic policies of countries. They require to influence the very way the economy is run, the very way the measures for investment are adopted by government, the very way the industries are established, industrial policies are determined. And therefore, it was a direct attempt to influence, to change and bring about adjustments in the domestic economic policies of government, which until then were regarded as falling entirely within the sovereign domain of individual country and not subject to negotiations in international forums. Now, services, for example, you can't render services unless you also establish. So services involves right of establishment. A barber cannot transfer his skill across the border. He has to set up a shop to do his job. And a management expert cannot just transfer his expertise. He has to be on the shop floor of the factory to be able to give his management skill. So basically he has to come to your country. A banker has to establish himself in your country to do banking services. And so has the insurance company. And therefore right to establishment is a very essential aspect of transaction in services. It is not something which just happens at the border. So these were the two major aspects in which these negotiations were different from all other negotiations. Now, precisely because of these reasons, the developing countries opposed the introduction of the subject in a trade negotiation. They even said that we don't need a trade negotiation so soon, because the Tokyo round of negotiations were finished just about a year or two before that, and they say that we have not even implemented many of the agreements reached in the Tokyo round. So why this indecent hurry? Why drag us into something where we don't know our own position? We don't know how our position is going to be affected. And we basically in 1982 ministerial meeting, we did not allow this subject to be brought in the forum of GATT. But then the pressure was on, the developing countries had become more and more vulnerable in the world, and ultimately in 1986 we had to succumb, and we agreed to the launching of a new round of negotiations, including these subjects, that is trims and services. Now, while agreeing so, we wanted to safeguard our position to the maximum extent possible. For developing countries, the Uruguay round of trade negotiation was something which they were forced to accept. They were almost like a sacrificial lamb taken to the altar to be sacrificed. And they knew that that was their position. They knew that they had themselves very little to gain from these rounds, and therefore their task was confined to damage minimization as to what they should do so that the harm that can be done to them is the minimum. And for this, they did a few things in the Punta del Este Declaration, which launched the Uruguay round. Firstly, in TRIPS, they said that it is now the business of GATT to discuss what is called norms and standards of intellectual property right protection. There is you can discuss what is the effect of intellectual property laws on trade of other nations. That is all that you can do in GATT. But you cannot say how much of protection a country is giving to the patents of other countries. That is, you can't discuss the norms and standards of intellectual property patents. Patent being one of the important intellectual properties. And it was accepted more or less in Punta del Este. Then secondly, in TRIPS, they said that you can discuss the trade effect of an investment measure, but you can't discuss investment measure per se. You can't say that if you invest, you have to use that much of, you can't say that, you can't go into the legislation of governments as to how much of raw material should be used in investment, how much of foreign exchange should be brought in for investment. You have no business to go into. But if a country has adopted an investment law which has trade effect, then you can discuss it, but not the investment measures per se. On services, they say that all right to discuss services, but our ability to liberalize services is very limited. Services industries is at a very nascent stage in developing countries. We need to protect them. You people have taken 40 years to develop your service industries. None of our service industries are competitive, and therefore we would not be able to do much of opening up of our service industry. And finally, what was the reason why, say, a matter like intellectual property right, they insisted on discussing in GATT and not in the proper UN forum for it, which is called WIPO. There is a UN organization called World Intellectual Property Organization. And patents, trademarks, book rights, they are all discussed in WIPO. But why did the developed countries insist that they should be brought away from WIPO and discussed in GATT? The reason was that GATT functions on the basis of retaliation. There is a clause in GATT, if I am not mistaken, it is Article 23, which says that if a country adopts a measure which affects the interest of a country, another country adversely, that country will complain against it. And after that, a panel will be set up to determine the damage done to the trade of that country. And if that panel recommends that damage that has been done amounts to $200 million, the other country will afford $200 million additional opportunity for trade. If that country refuses to do so, then the country which is complaining has the right to impose restriction amounting to that amount against the export of that country. And then, even if then it doesn't work, then that country has the right to walk out of GATT. This is basically Article 23. Now, the GATT has this retaliatory provision as distinguished from the instruments of other UN organizations. Because the instruments in other UN organizations provide for arbitration, but no retaliation. And therefore the developed countries thought that they will be able to get their intellectual rights property protected best. They will force the markets of developing countries in the service industry best if they can retaliate in terms of goods. That is, if you do not open your market for our services, we will withdraw our market for your goods. And this came to be known as cross retaliation. And so the developing countries, while accepting the Ruma, insisted that we would not accept cross retaliation. That what we are unable to do in services, you have no right to get it done by punishing us in the field. The draft that Mr. Dunkel put together basically ignores the interest of the developing countries in almost all the areas. And it basically is designed to protect the interest of the developed countries. And that was the reason why how the Dunkel text militates against the interest of the developing countries and particularly against the interest of India. And I will take the TRIPS, trade related to Cuba, in April 1991. Then the Indian delegation gave in the subject. They accepted that norms and rights can be discussed in GATT, in the intellectual property right. There is how much, what is the length for which you should give protection, how much protection you should give to intellectual property rights, what qualification you can make, all these you can discuss. Firstly, the TRIPS is not a part of trade negotiation, because protecting patent right is an entirely different thing altogether. It is a kind of protecting the right of monopoly. It is almost like saying that the right of the multinational, let us negotiate terms for protecting the right of multinational corporations in India. That is not a part of multilateral trading system, and let alone being the part of a liberal trading system. Because when you protect a monopoly right, there is nothing liberal about it. Actually, protection of monopoly right is restrictive rather than liberal. And basically, there have been a few econometric studies done by economists who have come out with the finding that the global welfare will be worse if there is a high level protection of intellectual property right. And this is purely on the ground that the higher price will be extracted of the patents. And so the world community, if it is left to monopoly is protected, then higher price will be extracted, or on the whole, the world community will be worse off. And there have been econometric studies, and on that basis they have come to this conclusion. Now there has been this whole question of the increase in the prices of drugs, because you know that the Indian Patent Act does not provides for process patenting in certain products and not product patenting in those products. And these are basically pharmaceuticals, chemicals, food processing, and a few other industries. Now, by providing process patenting, we reserve to ourselves the right to find an alternative way of manufacturing the same medicine, an alternative technological route to manufacture the same medicine. But in this Dunkel draft, we will now be giving them product patent, in the sense that once a particular drug is patented, you have no right to try to produce the same drug by alternative routes. And thereby, all industries that have been set up on the basis of, say, 1/20th, 1/10 to 1/20th of those prevailing in their host countries. This has been mainly possible because we have found our own means of manufacturing the drugs, mainly encouraged by the process patenting. Now what will happen is that in the Dunkel draft, there are not only the provision of product patenting, in the sense that you will have to close down all these industries which are based on process patenting, but also there is a provision that compulsory licensing, in the Indian Act, if a particular firm which has a monopoly or a patent on a particular drug, if it does not manufacture that drug in the country, say within 3 years, then the government of India can give license for manufacturing it to any Indian manufacturer. Now this facility is not available in Dunkel text. And Dunkel text, it is stated that importation is as good as the working of the patent. That is, so long as a patent holder can go on importing that drug, then it means that he is working the patent, and he is not obliged to work the patent by way of setting up a manufacturing unit in the country. And this means that we will have to rely in different in our drugs from outside, our prices will shoot up. That it will increase by 30 to 60%, which is an absolutely absurd figure. I mean, it may not increase by 10 to 20 times, but it is bound to increase by at least 4 to 10 times. Then the other thing is that the government of India has given the point is that right from the beginning, the government of India's whole effort has been to justify the Dunkel Draft and come out with arguments in support of it. And one of the arguments, it is not the the entire range of pharmaceuticals which should be taken into account to find out what is the percentage which is on patent. We should take into account only the therapeutic drugs. And so far as therapeutic drugs are concerned, about 42% of them is on patent. The second is the argument that you can go from on-patent to off-patent drug is false because the patient buys the medicine which the doctor prescribes. And if the doctor feels that a medicine which has come to the market has one additional component which has a great therapeutic value, the patient will go by that. He doesn't go to the market to shop for drugs because in that case he will be replacing the doctor himself. And therefore the choice really does not exist. In theory the choice is there to go from on-patent to off-patent, but in practice that choice cannot be enjoyed by the ordinary patient. Besides, there is a medicine. And because of the advertisement that they do, consumers tend to believe in that. And therefore this whole argument of people being able to go from on-patent to off-patent drug is a totally false argument. And the government has been giving this argument again and again. That is about the price. Now I think that even worse effect of the patenting is going to be on research and development in the country, on the technology level of development in the country. And you know that technology is the kind of critical element in growth in any country. And if our technological developments and the breakthrough in technology that India has achieved have been mainly in the public sector. Our highest technological achievements are in nuclear energy field, are in space energy field, by ONGC and by some of our steel mills which are nationalized in the public sector. These are the areas where we have done breakthrough in technology, and not areas where simply granting patent has led to big invention. Now I will give you one example. In drugs, you have the process patent by which you do alternative formulation, which we have been doing. But there is another way, is that when you come out with basic invention, and that is the discovering a new molecule. Now the discovery of a new molecule has been calculated requires an investment of $200 million on an average. Now tell me which Indian firm today in the chemical field or in the pharmaceutical field is prepared to invest $200 million to discover a molecule. And with the coming of the transnationals, the incentives will be less and less. At least Nirma was able to capture the market. It discovered new slogans for capturing the imagination of the consumers. But now on the TV you see that Nirma is fast going out, and you see Camay and Dove and the area because of the manner in which we have allowed Procter and Gamble to come into the country. And this is not going to happen in all other areas. And now our firms will become basically the salesmen of the multinationals who will come with their patents, rather than having the incentive to discover themselves. And I think that it is going to be a major setback to our invention, to technology in India. Now, I think I will touch upon the TRIMS briefly. That is trade-related investment measures. Now, what Dunkel Draft has done in the TRIMS are basically three things. One is that the government of India cannot now tell a company which comes to invest in India that you will have to use a particular percentage of raw material from India. This is one. Secondly, the government of India cannot tell a foreign investor that you will have to employ Indian expertise. They can bring their own expertise for even the things which Indians can do here. Thirdly, that the government of India cannot say that you would be allowed to import raw material for your industry that you are setting up only if you are able to export, what it is called foreign exchange balancing. So even that you cannot now insist. The result will be that our self-sufficiency will be seriously undermined because our raw material need not be used. Instead, raw material will be imported from abroad. Our trained manpower need not be used. Instead, they would be coming from outside. And the other result would be that there could be a serious problem for our balance of payments. This is basically what is happening. It will happen in trims. Now I go to services. And I will very quickly go over this area. In the services, in the Dunkel Draft, there is no kind of commitment for liberalization per se. We have not said that we will allow the American transport companies to come to this extent or the Japanese telecommunication company to come to this extent. In the Dunkel Draft, only the broad guidelines have been accepted that you will allow MFN treatment to the service industries of other countries, A, and B, that there will be a transparency, that whatever rules that you have in the service industries will be notified to GAP, will be known to everyone. But that is not the main thing. Main things are two where we have lost out. Well, where we have lost out is that Dunkel Draft provides that once you agree to liberalize a service industry, then your commitment of liberalization is almost unlimited. And I will just read out in the financial services what the Dunkel Draft provides. It says that if you liberalize in financial services, you can exercise no control over equity, no limit on transfer of money that can be made, no limit on the number of experts that can be brought, no limit on the number of transactions that can take place every year. Now these are some of the conditions done. Now the government of India can very easily say that we will not liberalize. We would say that we do not liberalize our financial services, we do not liberalize our transport services. But the point is that if the government has succumbed on the whole area of Dunkel Draft, in spite of knowing that its best interest is not to enter into these negotiations, how do you expect the government to hold firm when it will be under pressure to liberalize in the service industry? The same leverages that the developed countries are applying today for forcing us to bend on our knees on the Dunkel Draft as a whole will be applied to force us to liberalize in the service sectors. And once we liberalize in the service sectors, and I give you the one example, financial services, you will have to denationalize your insurance, you will have to denationalize your banking, because that goes with that. Foreign companies can hold equity up to 100% in any industry, and the foreign companies can transfer any amount of resources. Actually, they can transfer your own savings to their other subsidiaries in the world, if you strictly go by the wording of the Dunkel text. But that is a negotiation which is not completed. That negotiation was supposed to have been taken to some stage by the end of 15th December. The fear is that it will not be completed, it will continue, but I am afraid that we really do not have the economic spine to withstand the pressure and not to liberalize in these areas also. Now the other thing about services sector is that our interest lay in seeking freedom of our labor to move to foreign markets to find jobs, because we are not only we are surplus in skilled and semi-skilled labor. And we thought that, as labor is a service, and we thought that if we are liberalizing for their services, we will get liberalized treatment for our services. And in Dunkel Draft, we have not succeeded in that at all. Actually, the developed countries have said that this is guided by our immigration law, and it has got nothing to do with trade law. I mean, we could have said that in trims and trims, this is guided by our economic laws and by our domestic macroeconomic laws, and we have nothing to do with that. But here they easily give the argument that their migration of foreign labor is guided by immigration laws, and it doesn't come within that, and so therefore you cannot seek freedom for the movement of your labor in their markets. And all that we have agreed is that if there is a particular job for which a particular number of labor is required, then in each case that number can go subject to negotiation. This is all that is provided for in the Dunkel Draft. So basically free movement of skilled labor to find jobs in other markets has not been accepted at all. And one of the major interests of India has not been met in the Uruguay. Now, these are the two things that I wanted to tell you about services. Now, I come to, these are all the areas in which we lost out, in which we were afraid as to what we will do, in which we made qualifications not to go beyond a measure, and where we were forced to go the whole hog. Now, I would like to deal with only one aspect where we had our own interest involved, and where we wanted to safeguard our interest, and that was textiles. And in textiles, as you know that the textile is the one industry where the developed countries have competitive advantage. We are able to compete with the developed countries. Textile is the second largest export of India after gems and jewels. And many of the other developing countries, all the export that they have been able to build, like Bangladesh, like Mauritius, is almost 90% based on textiles. And in this industry, the trade was controlled by an international regime called MFA, Multi-Fiber Agreement. And the attempt of the developing countries in the negotiation was to abolish Multi-Fiber Agreement and allow the textile trade to take place on a free basis, which is called integration of the MFA with GATT. This is the kind of technical term used, that you merge the MFA, Multi-Fiber Agreement, into GATT and allow it to take place according to the rule of the GATT. Now, what the developed countries have agreed is that for between now and the year 2003, between now and the year 2000, the liberalization will be, two arguments were given in its favor. The first argument was that there will be a free multilateral trading system, which will be liberal, which will be without restriction or with very little restriction, and this will benefit the whole world. And as Mr. Ghosh has said, that one calculation is that the world community will gain about $200 billion in terms of exports if the Uruguay round is implemented. And incidentally, the calculation for India's gain is only $170 million. So this is going to be our gain if we really achieve this gain. So this was one claim made, that we really have a free multilateral trading system. Other claim that was made, and this claim was made almost as recently as 6 months ago in a seminar by Jagdish Bhagwati and Srinivas, saying that if you do not agree to the Uruguay round, the world trading system will get fragmented into discriminatory regional blocks, trading blocks. And therefore we agree to it. The only way in which you can save the world from fragmenting into regional blocks is to go in for the free multilateral trading system symbolized by the Uruguay round. Now, I would like to submit that both these things are totally misleading. They are not borne by facts at all. Let us take the claim of free multilateral trading system. Does the Uruguay round make for a free multilateral trading system? The answer is an emphatic no. The liberalization that has taken place in the Uruguay round is very, very limited. And I don't think that it is very much more than the liberalization that took place in many of the earlier rounds of trade negotiation. And firstly, a restrictive regime has been imposed on the world community, and that is the IPR, higher level of protection of IPR, which is an illiberal system. Secondly, that, as I told you, that agriculture is going to be liberalized by only 20%. That so far as the liberalization of textile is concerned, very little foreseen in the near future, and God knows what will happen in the long distance. And then there is nothing in the Uruguay round to control the restrictive trade practices of transnational corporations. And they are the ones which practice all kinds of illiberal things, all kinds of restrictions, all kinds of malpractices. And there were two organizations which were dealing with the restrictive trade business of multinational, the Committee on Transfer of Technology of UNCTAD and the Transnational Corporation of UN. Both these organizations have been prevented from dealing with it on the ground that it is being taken care of in the Uruguay round. And in the Uruguay round, in the entire Dunkel text, there is not a single provision for regulating the restrictive trade practices of the multinational corporation. So this is the kind of multilateral free trading system that you are going to have. Now about the regional blocs, there have always been regional blocs and there will always be regional blocs. And those who are arguing to the contrary were just misleading the world. And it is surprising that an economist of the caliber of Srinivas and Jagdish Bhagwati should mislead the world. Because there is an Article 24 in GATT which provides for the establishment of free trade area and customs union. And throughout the Dunkel, throughout the Uruguay round of negotiation, nobody suggested that Article 24 should be abolished. If you have such a faith in establishing a free multilateral trading system, then why don't you say, because the Dunkel text revamps the whole GATT, so why don't you suggest that Article 24 should be done away with? But nobody suggested it because they knew right from the beginning that they will keep their regional trading system. And we have seen that regional trading systems have not only been kept, but they have been strengthened. New ones have been established in NAFTA, in the integrated European market. Now IPEC is being sought to be converted into a trade bloc. So I think that there is nothing new about it. And basically the international trading system that is going to emerge is going to be the same old thing, a very limited, qualified, liberal multilateral system, a discriminatory regionalism and arbitrary unilateralism. Because Americans want to retain 301 and this, their condition of agreeing to MTO is that if they are able to retain special and super 301 side by side with MTO. And I predicted it is only 2 days away from today, you will see that some form of MTO will be created with the Americans retaining their option on super and special 301. This is what will happen on 15 December. I had said this thing in December when Dunkel text came, and I said it today, and let us see what happens 3 days later. I think that where do we go from here? The government is going to sign on the dotted line on the 15th August, 15th December. I don't think that it ever really had the intention to negotiate seriously. Because when we made a strong plea for negotiating some of the points on which our interests were not safeguarded, nothing was done for almost 6-7 months, till almost July, August, September 1992. And when under the pressure of public opinion, some moves were made, they were more in the nature of making motions for the sake of making motions. They were basically for winning the public opinion. Because everything that has been written by the government since then, and to which we have had access, were designed to support, to be the apologia of the Dunkel text, and not to say what is our interest involved and how we can safeguard our interest. And this is what is going to happen. Now, why is so? I think that this is very clear. This is because of the kind of development strategy we have decided to follow. The way we have decided to hike our economy on the multinational corporation, the flow of capital from them, the flow of technology from them, the way we have decided that our economy can develop only if we are able to increase our exports substantially. I think that there is a part of it, and I don't see you around as an isolated event. It is a multi-pronged, it is a part of a multi-pronged strategy mounted by the IMF and the World Bank with the blessing of the developed countries, and other part of the strategies are the IMF World Bank conditionalities, are the conditionalities that are applied in bilateral assistance, are the structural adjustment policy which are imposed upon government, and therefore Uruguay round is not going to be the end of the world. Even after signing, we will be continue to be the victims of the other parts of the strategy, and I think that if we do not make good, there is a real fear of the Latin Americanization of India. And my only hope is that this vast country where great things were done, where we had experiment of the Gandhian type only in our generation, where we have got activists and groups talking in different languages, I don't think that they will ever allow India to be Latin Americanized. Thank you.
has also given us a historical background of personal experience as well as immense knowledge of the subject on the processes which have been involved and the reasons why these processes have taken place as they have. There is one particular aspect of the GATT negotiations, the Dunkel Draft, which has a very serious implication for people in this country and in countries like this, and it relates to the area of biotechnology and natural resources. On this issue, in fact, the government of India and even the other critical elements in India who have been talking about the Dunkel Draft had not focused any attention at all, because most of the attention in the area of TRIPS was focused on the issue of drugs and pharmaceuticals. Partly this was because the drugs and pharmaceuticals industry is relatively better organized, although of course it is in great danger of disappearing altogether if the Dunkel Draft is adopted, but also because it was an area which was more apparent. The farmers in the country are less organized, the genetic scientists are even less organized, and therefore that area was suffering by neglect. And in a very major development, I think, a small group of informed people led by Dr. Suman Sahaya started a campaign a few months ago called the Gene Campaign, which focused attention on this area. Now this campaign run with very meager resources, but with a great deal of information and dedication, not only managed to raise public opinion in the country, to the extent that now you have Professor Nanjunda Swami and Mahendra Singh Tikait and various other farmers leaders talking about this issue in different parts of the country. But it also made the government, I think, aware for the first time of the implications in the field of biotechnology of the Dunkel Draft. We are very fortunate that we have Dr. Suman Sahaya here with us, and I would request her to tell us more about the effects of the Dunkel Draft on agriculture generally, and particularly in the area of biotechnology. Thank you.
To what Dr. Das mentioned, agriculture, biotechnology, scientific research. I personally consider that in the Dunkel text, perhaps the most dangerous clause is that which demands the right to patent life forms like plants and animals. According to the Indian Patent Act, any living organism cannot be protected by any form of intellectual property. No plant, no animal, no bacteria, no virus can be brought under a patent. There is a very good reason for this, and I might tell you that until 1980, no country in the world had allowed patents to be exercised over living organisms. Not the United States, not Europe even today, not Japan, not Canada, nobody. It was first in 1980 that the Americans changed their own patent laws and allowed the patenting first of bacteria, then of plants, and now of animals. This is a very significant development because it is very closely related to what is happening in GATT. And why has all this been done? The important thing to understand is why has suddenly this aspect of patent been extended to the realm of living organisms, and why has this been brought into a trading organization? The reason for that is very simple. And the reason for that is that with the new technology that has developed, which is now popularly called biotechnology, and it covers a very wide range of subjects. Biotechnology covers agriculture, it covers drugs and pharmaceuticals, it covers energy, mining, feedstock chemicals. In fact, it has been estimated by several agencies that in the next 2 to 3 decades, up to 60 to 70% of the global economy will come from biotechnology. That is how huge this economic sector is. and it is for the control of biotechnology that all these patent games are being played. Because the word biotechnology, as you will understand, refers to a technology based on living organisms. Bios is life, and biotechnology is a technology which touches upon the use of living organisms. Now, living organisms are only, it sounds very complicated, it's not. Biodiversity. Everything that is living. We use plants in agriculture. We also use plants for medicines. In fact, it is estimated that the market for plant-based drugs is $60 billion a year, and it's growing. So, the TRIPS chapter, the Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights chapter of the Dunkel Draft, has demanded that all member states will have to accept the protection by patents or some similar form of plant varieties. What are the consequences for India if this happens? The consequences for India are devastating. I'll first deal with scientific research. You know that India has a very good scientific research base, perhaps not in all areas, but certainly in agriculture biotechnology. India has one success story post-independent, if you really want to call that, and that is food self-sufficiency on its own accord. The level of agricultural scientists in this country is very good. We are internationally acclaimed to be highly proficient as agricultural scientists, as a scientific community that knows how to exploit scientifically genetic resources or plants or animals or what you call biodiversity or living resources or living organisms. These are all words that mean the same thing. What will happen to our scientific research is that faced with the competition from multinational companies who are also now engaged in research on agricultural and other biotechnology, our scientific research will be very severely hampered for two major reasons. Today, any scientist has access to any scientific material in the world and to all scientific data in the world. Those of you who have carried out research know that you build on research that has been published before. And the greatest prize that a scientist seeks is to publish his or her results in the most prestigious journal as fast as possible. This will stop. Once patents enter the field of scientific research, people will not want to publish in journals. They will want to talk to companies and say, look, I have these kind of results, can we patent this? Can we make a patentable product out of the kind of results that I have? And the free flow of scientific information will stop. The free flow of scientific material will stop. Today, any scientist, if she writes to a laboratory anywhere in the world and says, look, I'm doing a wheat project, and you have these 3 varieties of wheat which I need for my research project, can you send it to me? You will get 3 packets of wheat without asking for payment, without asking any questions, and you can continue your research project. You will do the same thing if you are asked for material. All this will also stop. Once it becomes patented, and if I have a patented variety, then you will have to pay a royalty fees for using that material. Now, unfortunately, it sounds very good to say that we can patent as well. It doesn't quite work that way. Science and scientific excellence is unfortunately as much a matter of money as it is of talent. And faced by the research budgets of a multinational company like Siva Gaidy or Saunders, I don't think that the ICAR or any of our agricultural institutions or many of our premier research institutions, sheer money for money, will be able to compete. So which means that if ICAR has 10 scientists on a wheat project with a budget of, let's say, 50 lakhs, Siva Gaidy will have a wheat project with 500 scientists and 500 crores. I don't think it needs too much guessing to find out who will go to the patent office. Obviously, the person who's got more money and will be able to buy more scientific skills will be the one who will be registering patents. And this is how the bias will change in favor of multinational companies who will bring big money into scientific research. Already our institutions are strapped for resources to invest in research. Armed with patents, foreign capital, multinational companies, foreign companies will be able to push Indian institutions out of business. Our ability to indulge in indigenous research will be severely restricted. This, of course, will have terrible implications for individual technology building. What will happen in agriculture? This has, of course, become the most emotive issue, and this is what the Commerce Minister is constrained to focus on even in Parliament, even the fragmentary debate that has been held in Parliament. Agriculture is a very obvious area that will be hit. Quite simply because if we allow the patenting of seeds, or the protection of seeds in any other way, these patents will be held by foreign companies. I just explained to you how all the options are in their favor. Already in India, 10 to 15 of the largest multinational companies in the world that have acquired an interest in the seed trade and in biotechnology have already opened their offices in India. Not only in Delhi and Bombay, but in Bareilly and Shahjahanpur. That is how far their network has been established already. What will happen once multinational companies or large seed companies who have the right to patent, once they enter the market, I don't think it takes a lot to imagine that they will very quickly acquire large shares of the market. Very quickly. These will be the seeds that will be sold predominantly in the seed store, even in Bhati village in Muzaffarpur. Because their marketing strategy is aggressive and their infrastructure is already laid down through the pesticide market that they had conquered in India a long time ago. So the farmer will be faced with a seed supply, increasingly faced with a seed supply, from which he cannot, or let us say over which, he does not exercise his traditional rights. What happens today in every country in the world, and certainly in India? What are the traditional rights of farmers that will be taken away by this bill? Under the conditions of the Dunkel Draft, the farmer's right to save seed is put into question. The farmer's right to sell seed is put into question, and the farmer's right to modify seed is also put into question. When I say put into question, I mean abolished. This is a right that you may want to negotiate for, but your government has not done that. According to patent laws, seed production out of that seed will only be possible by the patent holder. The farmer has no rights. That means the Indian farming community will probably face a situation when the farmer will have to buy seed for every sowing. He will be forced to go back to the seed store belonging to the foreign company and buy seed every time for every crop. I know there will be a question asking as to who will implement this and how will it be possible to enforce it. I will come back to that at the end of my talk. The other right that will be taken away is the right to sell seed. The Commerce Minister has had to concede in Parliament that these rights will be taken away from the farmer. In the case of the seed that the farmer can sell, I think it needs to be understood that under today's conditions, the annual seed requirement of Indian agriculture is 6 lakh tons a year. Out of these 6 lakh tons, almost 4 lakh tons is provided by the farming community, and only 2 lakh tons is provided by the state and national seeds corporations. Which means today if you suddenly abolish the right of the farmer to sell seed, there will be a vacuum in the seed market of 4 lakh tons, which means 2/3 of the seed requirement of this country, which has been provided by farmers, will simply disappear. And who will step into this market of 4 lakh tons? Those multinational seed companies that have gained entry into this country and that are waiting to enter the market. As soon as the Indian farmer is barred from selling seed, 4 lakh tons of seed will not reach the market. This shortfall will be provided by multinational companies. As to what implications this has for food security, you can understand. I do not think there's any country in the world that will ever allow food production, the very essence of food production, to pass into foreign hands. This is the whole fight with Korea and Japan right now. They will not, no country has allowed so far. Any dilution, any tampering with 100% food self-sufficiency, and for a borderline country like ours that is sufficient sometimes and not sufficient sometimes, it is of paramount importance. I do not even invoke words like sovereignty, although I think we will come to that. If you cannot ensure your own food supply, I think your sovereignty is threatened. But in terms of self-sufficiency in food, we simply cannot tolerate a situation where the seed supply of this country is in foreign hands, certainly not to that extent. So that will be the implication of patenting seeds. Number one, the loss of the right to produce his own seed. Number two, the loss of the right to sell seed. If the farmer loses the right to produce seed for himself, farming, which, as Mr. Dubey mentioned, was not just an economic activity here, it was a livelihood for many of our people, will cease to become tenable for most of them. There are very few farmers in this country, very small percentage of farmers, who can buy seed for every sowing. What will happen to the small and marginal farmers who will not be able to indulge in this expensive agriculture? They will be forced off the land, they will be forced off agriculture, and they will be further marginalized, turn to labor, migrate to cities, whatever. But a severe economic blow. Because let us not forget that for many, many farmers, the landholdings suffice to feed themselves. They may not be producers of grain in the classical sense, but they are self-sufficient in food. And that in itself is a tremendous thing, because that means they are not dependent for food. They are self-sufficient in food, and certainly this category of farmer will not remain self-sufficient anymore. And the economic consequences of a step like this can be foreseen. As for the right to sell seed, apart from the other aspect of providing a vacuum to be filled in by all types of undesirable elements, the seed sale also provides an additional income for the farmer. And this source of income will be taken away under the patent clause. In addition to that, we are faced with a situation in agriculture today that the only way agriculture can be sustainable for this growing population and still meet the needs of high yield and conservation of material, conservation of agricultural material, conservation of genetic resources, is to go in for locally developed varieties, which means the earlier concept of releasing IR8 for all of India for paddy has proved to be not successful. It has fulfilled a limited goal, but it has not proved to be successful. We are looking now, modern agriculture is looking now at alternatives, where you will have to release varieties in a much more differentiated level to meet local agroclimatic requirements. This is only possible if you have a thoroughly decentralized seed industry. The more decentralized and the more skilled the seed industry is, the more capable you will be of meeting these targets. And exactly antipodal to this target is the passing into the hands of large companies of the seed trade, because by necessity this will mean the release of very few varieties which will become successful in the market for the reasons of being aggressively marketed. But that is against our interest in maintaining food sustainability over a period of time. That is as far as agriculture is concerned. As far as biotechnology is concerned, biotechnology is an exploding new technology that has really now begun to dominate, as I said, the global economy, because it is an unprecedentedly diverse technology. As I said, it touches fields like mining. There are now microorganisms or bacteria that are known to process low-grade ores, which were not economic before. So that is how biotechnology has entered the field of mining. For us, a very, very important concept associated with microorganisms in biotechnology are biofertilizers and biopesticides. India has already launched on massive scales of biofertilizers in paddy cultivation. We will have to reduce our dependence on chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides. We are moving towards that. Global agriculture is moving towards that. And India has a head start in technology, in the development of biofertilizers and biopesticides, which are based on living organisms. What will happen to us when these become patentable? That means the future category of agricultural inputs like fertilizer and pesticides will also become patentable. So the Indian farmer will face not just his patented seed, he will face patented biofertilizer and he will face patented pesticide. How else does biotechnology link with this whole field of patents? I think in general, it doesn't matter how many economic sectors it touches. What is important to understand with respect to biotechnology and India's special position is that never before has India been in a position to participate, and not only to participate, but to be a dominant player in any technology. When the Industrial Revolution came, we were not even a country. When successive revolutions, the most important of which was the electronic revolution, when it came, we simply we just sort of started in the 60s to become aware of our technological capacities. We didn't have any money. We still don't have that kind of capital that is required to exploit the new technology. We don't have the money to exploit informatics. We don't have the money to exploit telecommunications. These are the new technological breakthroughs. But we do have the ability to exploit biotechnology. And the reason for that is for the first time there has been a technological breakthrough that is not capital intensive. Biotechnology's greatest cost is not capital, it is skilled manpower. Biotechnology does not need huge amounts of money to buy expensive machinery and build expensive sheds. It needs constant monitoring by skilled people. India, as you know, is one of the world's largest reservoirs of skilled manpower. What else does biotechnology need? What is the raw material of biotechnology? Genetic resources, biodiversity, those living organisms that we have talked of earlier. That is the foundation material of biotechnology. And just like God gave the Arabs oil, God gave developing countries or the countries of the tropical areas biodiversity. He didn't give the temperate countries this. So today, the industrialized countries of the world are faced with a technology for which they have the technological know-how, but they don't have the raw material. Because all the raw material, all the biodiversity of the world is concentrated in the tropical areas, where today's developing countries happen to be. India is a particularly rich repository of biodiversity, which means it has a very large amount of the foundation material, the raw material that is required to exploit biotechnology. And the third input into the use of this technology is the level of scientific knowledge, the technology itself. And as I said, I think India's flagship skill has been in agricultural biotechnology, in genetics, in the study of living organisms because of our very strong base in agriculture. So, of the three major inputs for biotechnology, that means the skilled manpower, that means the genetic resources, and that means the level of technology. India has it all, which means that today, if it does not commit itself to the conditions of the Dunkel Draft, if it does not accept patents on this biodiversity, if it does not accept that plants and animals can be brought under the purview of patents, then India has the potential to emerge as a global player in the field of biotechnology. We have never had a chance as good as this to engage on a path of self-reliant economic growth as we now have through biotechnology. I submit that it would be insanity of the highest order to squander this chance. And the best way of squandering it is to grant patent rights. Because the demand to patent has been made by industrialized countries to gain access to this genetic resources, to gain access to this biodiversity, to gain access to the raw material of biotechnology. More or less, this is the substance, not only of the Dunkel Draft, it is the substance of the Biodiversity Convention, it is the substance of several bilateral agreements that India is already engaged in and will continue to be engaged in. The control of the living resources that are required for biotechnology has become a very major economic target. The South has these resources, the North does not. That is why the immense focus in the Dunkel Draft, that is why the immense focus in the Biodiversity Convention to bring plant, animal, and other living resources under the purview of patents, because given their financial advantage, the foreign companies will always be in a better position to patent. In any case, through the patent, they will acquire monopolistic access to the resources that they physically don't possess. So I submit to you that accepting the TRIPS chapter, accepting any kind of intellectual property protection, whether it is patents or any other way that is today concealed in the Dunkel Draft, would be suicidal for this country's economic growth. And I think it has been a matter of very great sorrow, I would say, that this government has consistently failed to take any steps to safeguard the national interest in this regard. I know for 2 years that Gene campaign has been in existence and we have had to deal formally, officially and informally with various arms of the government. For 2 years they have been telling everybody that we are isolated, that we cannot do anything about this. But for 2 years they have not taken one single step to end this alleged isolation. I go to teach in Europe. And I have used my contacts, academic and otherwise, as much in the political circles as also in the academic circles, to lobby support for the point of view that the patent issue is against the interests of the South, against the economic interests of the South. There's a great deal of understanding for our point of view. There are several groups that are willing to support the fact that the South, and particularly countries, emerging technology countries like India, have a lot to lose. And the question that was raised every single where was, why has the government not done anything to protest? Because the government has not placed its unhappiness with about any of these issues, although the consequences would be so grave at any forum where any other kind of renegotiation would have been possible. I end with the appeal. Green Campaign has tried to fight on these issues, and I will end with an appeal for your assistance and support. I would like you to become aware of these issues and to talk about these issues and really to understand and therefore to resist at whatever level the move to accept these provisions of the Dunkel Draft. Thank you.
One after another can get more boring, and it might be worthwhile having a dialogue, questions from the floor which panelists will answer. But before doing that, I'm not going to speak on any of the technicalities because I think Dunkel and Suman Sahai have more than adequately covered the only thing which I thought I should raise, because some of the questions might relate to this, is what happens now. As Mr. Dunkel said, that on the 15th of December, which is 72 hours from now, the draft will be either signed or rejected. But if it is rejected, it will not be because of us. If it is rejected, it will be because of some unforeseen difficulty which might arise among the developed countries, between Japan and United States, between Korea and United States, between EC and United States, and whatever it might be. But we are not major players in any possibility of disruption of the GATT process. In fact, we have had a former Commerce Secretary going on record, and a Commerce Minister going on record in Parliament, saying that we have no choice. We have no choice, we have to sign, and the spectre which has been raised is that if, as Mr. Dunkel has said, that if we don't sign on this, the Americans will come and beat us with Super 301, Special 301, and various other kinds of devices that we might become. Now, again, as Dr. Sahai has pointed out, this is a bit of a lie. Because while it is true that the Americans will continue to try to beat us with Super 301, Special 301, even after we sign the GATT, even after we become members of the Multilateral Trading Organization, it is not true that we have really no options. And this is the point which I would like to make. First of all, GATT is, again as Mr. Dunkel has said, is not like any other United Nations organization. From other United Nations organizations, you can be expelled. South Africa was expelled from the United Nations. From GATT, no country can be expelled. It is a contract between contracting parties. Therefore, the parties to that contract are not referred to as countries. They are referred to as contracting parties. And the law of contract applies there rather than the law of the United Nations sovereignty. It's a very different kind of a ballgame. Secondly, the one major country which is out of GATT is China. China left on its own. China could not be expelled from GATT. And whatever the price that China has paid, or whether it has gained or not gained, in fact we see that we are told that China has lost a great deal, but when we look at another side of China, we see 9%, 10% growth rate in China, a very, very positive trade balance, embarrassingly positive trade balance with the United States, which China has in spite of not being in GATT. So not being in GATT necessarily may not be a bad thing, even assuming that we are not members of GATT. But in any case, as I said, there is no reason that we will not continue to be members of GATT as founder members of GATT. India will continue to be a member of the Tokyo round of the GATT, even if it does not join the Uruguay round. The Tokyo round was the earlier round under which, so this is one possibility. Second, even assuming that we sign the draft, day after tomorrow, His Excellency, the Indian Ambassador to GATT, goes in the official car, flying the tricolor, and stands up there and says, well, we had no choice, we are signing. After that, what happens? After that, several things happen. In April, there is a meeting of ministers in Senegal, which is supposed to discuss the same thing, ratified at the ministerial level. So we have up to April. If our minister develops some spines up to that time, it's an unlikely eventuality. But nevertheless, hoping for the best. If our minister develops that kind of a spine, it is still possible at that stage to reopen the deal. Assuming that even he does not do it. even assuming that at that point also the Honorable Commerce Minister of India goes and says, well, we have no choice. Then what happens? Then it has to be ratified by Parliament. At that stage, various things arise. First of all, an act of the Sovereign Parliament, the Indian Patents Act of 1974, will have to be amended. It will have to be amended not by anybody else, but by the Parliament of India. And at that point, if our honourable members of Parliament develop not only spine, but also a little bit of interest in this subject, they will, in all honesty, reject that amendment. Now, at that point of time, in order to make them reject that amendment, several things have to be done. Meetings like this have to be held all over the place. Meetings like this are happening all over the place. The states of India will have to become aware of the issues involved. The Honorable Chief Minister of Bihar had other engagements and other concerns, and no doubt he keeps himself informed about these matters. But other chief ministers, other states and other state governments altogether will have to be taken into confidence on this. Now this was one issue on which the Commerce Minister, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, was very categorical in Parliament the other day. When it was raised in Parliament by some opposition members that the matter should be referred to the state governments also for discussion, only for discussions, because the state governments cannot negotiate directly with foreign powers. He was very categorical. He said the states have no role. Why? Because he's scared that if the states start getting a role in this business, then the scheme which Mr. Mujkundu talked about, the whole scheme of recolonization of India, not only in that, but through the IMF, through the World Bank, through various other kinds of institutions which is going on, might become a little more difficult to implement than it is. Meanwhile, the people of India have to be informed about several things. People of India have to be informed not only about the inequities with the GATT perpetrators, but about the weaknesses of the government of India's own positions vis-a-vis GATT and vis-a-vis the Indian people. Let us take the issue of transparency in services with Mr. Mujkundu raised. Why is it that the United States or GATT has to come and tell us to have transparency in services? Transparency in services basically means that if you have rules, publish the rules. Make the rules available, first of all to your own people, and then to the GATT Secretariat or whoever else. We, up to now, do not have our banking rules. And the reason why we do not have our banking rules also results in the fact that large number of senior bureaucrats of the government of India have their children working in foreign banks. Because there are no rules, therefore these contacts are necessary for working in foreign banks. And because these children work in the foreign bank, therefore rules are formulated and formulated. So how are bank branches established? Not because the United States push pressure on us. Not because the United States says, okay, now let's open a branch of Citibank. The branches, new branches are opened when larger number of children of senior bureaucrats come of age and require jobs. So because there are no rules, these bank branches get opened. Now what prevents us from having that transparency? What prevents us from having that transparency is only the selfishness of our elite. So GATT is not only about the selfishness of the foreign elite. GATT is also about the selfishness of our elite. And our elite must also admit that up to now, its selfishness has got the whole country into trouble. Now whether this situation can be changed, I am not sure, but at least awareness about such matters can be raised. The people of India can demand, before the United States starts demanding that you implement human rights, the people of India should demand that you implement human rights. Why should the United States Senate have to tell us to behave decently with our own people? Why should the GATT Secretariat have to tell us to behave openly about rules? At the same time, now this is one issue. Another issue on which Dr. Sahai drew attention is drawing the attention of the people of India to the whole issue of food security. India is a net importer when you take wheat, rice and oils put together. In the field of wheat and rice only, sometimes it is argued that we might even be net exporters in some years. Some years we might have a little extra to sell somewhere. But if we put oil together, because man does not live by carbohydrate alone, as we all know, we are net importers. Now if we are net importers, we are by and large in the same situation as in Japan. And Japan is saying today that we will under no circumstance surrender our food security. We must, okay, we will open up, but will you guarantee that if you open up, you will always continue to supply enough food? That is the question that Japan is asking. And that is precisely the question which Europe asked in 1945 after the Second World War. Europe asked, when it was going through this whole situation of food insecurity, it asked, who will guarantee that European people will get adequate amount of food? Will you ensure that the sea lanes between Australia or Argentina to Europe are open all the time, that Nazi ships don't come in? Will you guarantee that submarines will not arise in the oceans and sink those ships? Will you ensure that the United States does not come up with all kinds of acts to prevent shipping, prevent transfer of food from one part of the world to the other? Now these are issues which we must be aware of, just as the Japanese have become aware of. Of course the Japanese will give in on this, but the Japanese will give in after having negotiated. We will give in even before having negotiated. We will give it even before having become aware of the problem. Now this is the difference. On the question of isolation, again Dr. Sahai and Mr. Dubey have pointed out, this isolation is a state of mind. Isolation does not actually exist. Mr. Muskun Dubey was at Punta del Este when India was negotiating. As far as I know, I was not there. I have read about it, I have heard about it. When India was negotiating, it was negotiating on its behalf, it was negotiating on behalf of the developing countries. And a whole lot of developing countries lined up they're behind India. What happened between Punta del Este and Geneva that the developing countries left India? There is a very interesting letter written by the EC chief negotiator to Mr. Arthur Dunkel, saying that India let down the developing countries and therefore it is in bad state. So please Mr. Dunkel, have some pity on India and be a little kind to India on the issue of trips. Do not be as stringent on trips as the United States want.
Your market, your infrastructure, your job capacity, your economy, the stability in your country, and these are the most important factors. And as I said, that empirically it has not proved correct. Now, on the other hand, I already told you that there is a lot in the Dunkel Draft which will inhibit technology transfer, and that is the non-availability of compulsory licensing, as I pointed out. Now, I think that what you have perhaps in mind is that whether, out of retaliation, because we would not be acceding to the Dunkel text and we would not be giving patent protection provided in the Dunkel text, because out of anger or retaliation, the foreign companies would stop producing. Now, that is an entirely different issue, because that is a question of putting pressure, and the question of striking blackmail, striking bargains, and that all depends upon the perception of the importance that the Indian market has for them. If their perception of the Indian market is that it is a big market, it is a luxury market, then we are able to make success of its economic growth, then I think that in spite of whatever we may do, by way of accepting or not accepting the Dunkel text, both foreign private capital and technology will continue to flow into it.
Mr. Dubey,
Dr. Sahai has painted a fairly grim picture of the implications of what will happen in agriculture, and more so in the matter of seed and biotechnology for the purpose of biopesticides and biofertilizers. What I would like to know is that in this background, and the fact that the Dunkel proposal seems to be on the verge of acceptance, almost like something inevitable coming on our head, is there any thought, or has your organization, which this Gene campaign, have you thought of some way to from within organize ourselves and take out our own patents and take out our own registrations with a view to beat them at their game?
That's a very interesting point. I do not believe that neither does Gene campaign believe in eternal protection. But I think what's important to understand is that the intellectual property system that any country ever accepts, and this has been the history of all of today's industrialized countries, must be commensurate with the stage of their technological development. So we will have to ward this off till we feel that we are ready and competitive. And I'll just give you 2 examples about how G7 nations like Italy have accepted product patents in the pharmaceutical sector as well as the 80s. Because they felt that they were technologically not ready to open and allow patents. We have thought of eventually moving towards a system that will make us competitive, but the time for that is not now, and the instrument for that is not the Dunkel Draft. India must definitely move ahead, and we campaign will work towards this efforts and towards this goal undoubtedly, to move towards a greater recognition of biotechnology as a key sector. But until that happens, there is no question of accepting this kind of, or let us say there is no question of, I can see you smiling, when I say there is no question of accepting, gene campaign strategy is also entirely clear in this. If the government proceeds, irrespective, we will also plead for defiance with the same dedication that we have worked for awareness.
Assuming that they know about that, I just want to know what is that is compelling the government of India to accept that. Why is it that we are saying that we have no option? Is it only Super 301? Is it only Special 301? Or is it something more insidious than what it is made out to be?
To do with our decision to open up our market on our own, even before the Dunkel Draft came up, even before the UBAN round started, when in the time of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, certain degree of liberalization was introduced. And even in the 1982 GATT Institute meeting, and in the Punta del Este, I think that there was some problem about our brief. I mean, I will give you one example that in Punta del Este we used to have a meeting of the ministers of developing countries, some 12 developing countries every day, and we used to talk out common strategy, and we used to follow that. Yeah. But in Montreal, the real-time review of the Punta of the Uruguay round, where I went, it was impossible for me to persuade the commerce minister to call a meeting of the developing countries minister. I mean, I was pressurizing him every day, Mr. Dinesh Singh was the minister, and he would just not agree, because he had got a brief which was going to go to the rest of the delegation from the perhaps top level political level in the country, that don't be seen as a kind of clanging against the Americans. And this is because we had taken a decision that we could gradually align our economy to the economy of the developed countries, and we will open it up and therein lay our economic salvation. And since then we have gone much further and further away from that. And basic reason is this: as a matter of fact, we are doing much more under structural adjustment plan, under IMF and World Bank conditionality, than we are doing under some of the provisions of Uruguay.
The need to balance the or to get the foreign exchange and the foreign currency loans from the IMF, was that the main reason why, in spite of the fact that the Dunkel Draft appears to be suicidal for the country, we succumbed to the pressure? And another part to this question: given the level of political intellect in this country,
the decision making authority is that. And as democracy, it is our job as the people to influence them. We can of course influence bureaucratic, bilateral, personal levels, but that is not the way the democracy should work. Democracy should work by influencing politicians, lobbying politicians, pressuring politicians, if necessary, voting out politicians. Thank you.
लेकिन तब अगर इस मल्टीलेटरल ट्रेडिंग अरेंजमेंट को हम अगर छोड़ दें तो फिर बायलैटरल रिलेशन हमारा सभी देशों के साथ करना पड़ेगा, हमारे लिए काफी हानिकारक हो सकता है। मैं एक बात जानना चाहता हूँ कि विकासशील देशों में R&D की स्थिति अच्छी है नहीं, पैसा वो खर्च करते नहीं, और विकसित देश वाले बिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर खर्च करते हैं, वर्षों उसके पीछे मेहनत करते हैं। तो क्या उनको उसके वो परिश्रम का कुछ फायदा नहीं मिलना चाहिए? आज अगर हम सॉफ्टवेयर एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं इंडिया से, क्या उसकी रॉयल्टी या उसका पेटेंट का अधिकार हमें नहीं होना चाहिए? जबकि 20% ग्रोथ रेट इस ये सॉफ्टवेयर स्टोरेज। पहली बात। दूसरी बात है ये कि शरद जोशी जैसे लीडर कहते हैं कि अगर हाईएस्ट प्रोडक्शन होता तो जो वो हायर कॉस्ट है उसको न्यूट्रलाइज करें। इसी तरह से अगर डिमांड बढ़ता है गुड्स का तो भी प्राइस लेवल कुछ नीचे आए। तो मुझे तो लगता है इस तर्क में भी दम है उनका।
I'll pick up that issue. The process of patenting has been extended to algorithms in the Dunkel Draft. यानी कि अगर आप कोई भी चीज ले लें, सॉर्टिंग ले लें, फाइल की सॉर्टिंग होती है डिसेंडिंग ऑर्डर या असेंडिंग ऑर्डर में, तो उसका जो एल्गोरिथम जो लिखा गया है उसको भी पेटेंट किया जा सकता है और पेटेंट किया जा रहा है। इसका मतलब है कि अगर हम कोई नया एल्गोरिथम लिखना चाहते हैं जिसमें एक सेक्शन सॉर्टिंग पे डिपेंड करता है तो हमको उस सेक्शन के लिए रॉयल्टी देनी पड़ेगी। इसका मतलब है कि अगर 3 या 4 तरीके से सॉर्टिंग का एल्गोरिथम लिखा जा सकता है और वो 3 या 4 तरीके पेटेंट हो चुके हैं, तो बिहार में बैठा हुआ कोई वशिष्ठ नारायण सिंह उसको दोबारा लिखने की जरूरत भी नहीं कर सकता, क्योंकि उससे पटना के हाई कोर्ट में उसके ऊपर मुकदमा चल सकता है। उसके आगे अगर उसको लिखना है, उसके आगे कुछ लिखना है, तो उसके लिए उसको रॉयल्टी देनी पड़ेगी और वो रॉयल्टी अमेरिका में बैठे किसी ऐसे आदमी को दी जाएगी जो काम यहाँ पे हो सकता है उसी की रॉयल्टी वहां देनी पड़ेगी। उसके आगे का जो मतलब the implications that go beyond this are even more stark. That is, if you are talking of only algorithms, जो आप सॉफ्टवेयर एक्सपोर्ट की बात करते हैं, हिंदुस्तान का the largest amount of human ware that we call are currently concentrated only in software. जैसे आप कह रहे हैं कि हिंदुस्तान में सॉफ्टवेयर हम लोग एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं। Once this Dunkel draft text is signed, once this TRIPS part has been implemented, उसके बाद ये जो आपका एक्सपोर्ट करना है बात, तो जो जहां तक हम बात करते हैं कि अगर हमने चक्के का इन्वेंशन किया, तो किसी आदमी ने चक्के का इन्वेंशन किया, उसके बाद हमने उससे
ये भी मैं जानना चाहता हूँ। WHO ने 270 ड्रग्स को सेंसर ड्रग्स घोषित कर रखा है और यहाँ हमारे ऊपर ये सिर्फ 10 ड्रग्स है जो पेटेंटेड है इंडिया। तो इतना हल्ला क्यों?
प्रस्ताव को स्वीकार न करें और इस बहुपक्षीय संस्था से हट जाए, जो द्विपक्षीय हमारे ऊपर दबाव पड़ेंगे, वो क्या भारत के हित में है या नहीं? हमारा ये मानना है कि इस वक्त एक बहुपक्षीय संस्था में होते हुए भी भारत पे उस तरह के दबाव पड़ रहे हैं। उसकी आज चर्चा भी हुई है जिसका नाम है सुपर 301। सुपर 301 अमेरिका ने हमारे ऊपर लागू किया है इसलिए कि उनका ये मानना है कि हम बौद्धिक संपदा अधिकार को उस तरह से नहीं देखते हैं जिस तरह से वो चाहते हैं कि हम देखें। यानी बौद्धिक संपदा की सुरक्षा हमारे कानूनों के तहत नहीं हो पाती। जब इस बहुपक्षीय गैप के तहत बौद्धिक संपदा का सवाल अभी तक तय नहीं हो पाया है, तो किस नियम और किस नीति के अनुसार अमेरिका को ये हिम्मत पड़ती है सुपर 301 लगाने की? कहने का मकसद ये है कि आज तो इस बहुपक्षीय गैप की ओर से किसी भी तरह से सुरक्षा नहीं मिल रही है, चाहे आप रहें चाहे आप नहीं रहें। सुपर 301 मिसाल है। एक और मिसाल आपको दे सकते हैं। आज की तारीख में अमेरिका के साथ कई एक अनुसंधान के प्रोजेक्ट्स चल रहे हैं, खास तौर से दवा उद्योग में, एनवायरमेंट में, उन क्षेत्रों में जिसमें जीवित प्राणियों का उपयोग होता है। इसलिए अमेरिका ने भारत से कहा है कि अगर भारत इस तरह के अनुसंधान के नतीजों को पेटेंट द्वारा सुरक्षित करने को नहीं तैयार है, तो अमेरिका इस तरह के अनुसंधान खत्म कर देगा, उसकी जो फंडिंग है उसको खत्म कर देगा। ये भी एक तरफा दबाव है जिसको कि बहुपक्षीय स्थिति होते हुए नहीं होना चाहिए। दूसरी बात आपने कही कि अगर अन्य कंपनियां R&D में रुपए खर्च करती हैं तो क्या इसका लाभ उनको नहीं मिलना चाहिए? हमारा मानना है कि इसका लाभ उनको मिलना चाहिए, लेकिन हमारा ये मानना नहीं है कि इन कंपनियों को ये अधिकार होना चाहिए कि वो अपनी जो भी जिस चीज को वो डेवलप कर रहे हैं, हम बायोटेक्नोलॉजी के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, कि वो रॉ मटेरियल के पैसे ना अदा करें। इस वक्त जो बायोटेक्नोलॉजी से संबंधित जितना विकास हो रहा है विकसित देशों में, वो उन जेनेटिक रिसोर्सेज के ऊपर हो रहा है, उन जीवित प्राणियों के ऊपर हो रहा है जिसको कि हम अपनी संपत्ति मानते हैं। उस संपत्ति के दाम नहीं चुकाए जाते। तो हमारा मानना है कि फायदा उठाया तभी जाता है, जा सकता है कानूनी तहत है, जबकि उस व्यापार के सब मुद्दे जो हैं वो सही तरीके से चले। अगर आप हमारी जैविक संसाधनों का बिना किसी प्रकार का दाम चुकाए उपयोग करना चाहते हैं अपने बायोटेक्नोलॉजी में, और फिर हमसे आप बहस करते हैं कि हमने तो इतने रुपए लगाए इस पे, हमको पेटेंट का अधिकार इस वजह से चाहिए, तो वो बहस हमारे सामने बेतक है, हमारे लिए वो बहस नहीं लागू हो सकती। तीसरा सवाल आपको जो था वो ये था कि शरद ऋषि का ऐसा मानना है कि भारत में जब प्रोडक्टिविटी बढ़ेगी तब हम इस चीज का फायदा उठा सकेंगे। हमारा भी ये मानना है, लेकिन आज तो नहीं है। हमारा ये नहीं मानना है कि भारत की कृषि या किसी भी क्षेत्र को हमेशा हमेशा के लिए सुरक्षित रखना चाहिए, लेकिन हमारा ये मानना है कि जब हम ऐसी स्थिति में पहुंच जाए कि हम मुकाबला कर सकें, कि हम अपने हितों की रक्षा कर सकें, तब हम खोल के और प्रतिस्पर्धा में आ जाना चाहिए।
मैं एक दो चीज़ें जोड़ना चाहता हूँ। वो पेटेंट्स, आम पेटेंट्स के लिए ये बात सही है कि जिन लोगों ने आविष्कार किया है उनको इसका पारिश्रमिक मिलना चाहिए, लेकिन प्रश्न उठता है कि कितना पारिश्रमिक मिलना चाहिए, किस हद तक मिलना चाहिए और किसके कीमत पर मिलना चाहिए। और डंकल ड्राफ्ट में कहा गया है कि बेसिकली जो हमारा पेटेंट एक्ट हिंदुस्तान में है उसमें तो पारिश्रमिक की सुविधाएं हैं, लेकिन उसमें कहा गया है कि आपको 7 साल तक मिलेगा, और हमसे कहा जा रहा है कि आपको 20 साल तक मिलेगा। उसमें कहा गया है कि अगर पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट के खिलाफ कोई चीज़ पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट के लिए बहुत आवश्यक हो तो आपको तुरंत उसको हमारे देश में पैदा करना हो। तो उसमें यह भी कहा गया है कि अगर आप बहुत दिन तक उससे फायदा उठाना चाहें तो आपको नहीं उठाने दिया जाएगा, उसके कुछ दिन के बाद आपको कंपल्सरी लाइसेंसिंग हो। तो ऐसी बात नहीं है। और तीसरी बड़ी बात यह है कि वो कहते हैं कि प्रोसेस पेटेंटिंग जो है वो टोटल पारिसी ना, इस बात को माना नहीं जा सकता, क्योंकि प्रोसेस पेटेंटिंग में भी अनुसंधान की आवश्यकता होती है, प्रोसेस पेटेंटिंग में भी R&D की आवश्यकता है, और उन मुल्कों में भी प्रोसेस पेटेंटिंग है। ये मत समझिए कि उन मुल्कों में प्रोसेस पेटेंटिंग नहीं है। और इसलिए ये कहना कि पारिश्रमिक हम देने को तैयार ही नहीं है, ये सही बात नहीं है। ये बात ये है कि किस हद तक देने को तैयार है और पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट में किस हद तक उसको रेगुलेट किया जाए।
सर, ये कंज्यूमर आंसर करेगा इस क्वेश्चन को। लाइक कंज्यूमर डिसाइड कि व्हाट विल बी मार्जिन ऑफ प्रॉफिट MNCs।
यहाँ पे ये सवाल है, इसका जवाब सीधा सीधी है। उन्होंने कहा भी कि सिर्फ 10 लाइफ सेविंग ड्रग्स आज पेटेंटेड हैं। दुनिया में कितने लोग इस बीमारी से मरते हैं, हमारे देश में कितने लोग इस बीमारी से मरते हैं। अगर मान लिया जाए कि हमारे देश में ज्यादातर लोग मामूली बीमारियों से मरते हैं, तो उनको उनके इलाज के जो ड्रग्स हैं वो पेटेंटेड क्यों नहीं है? क्योंकि उससे उनको फायदा नहीं है, क्योंकि जो परचेजिंग कैपेसिटी है वैसे लोगों की, वो उस तरह की ड्रग्स खरीद नहीं पाए, उसमें प्रॉफिट मार्जिन उतना नहीं होगा, इसलिए उस पर रिसर्च नहीं होगा, इसलिए उसकी पेटेंटिंग नहीं होगी। तो इसलिए आज लेप्रोसी पे ड्रग्स नहीं है, एड्स पे रिसर्च बहुत हो रहा है। तो एक लॉजिक इसकी भी होता है, क्यों 8-10% ड्रग्स से पेटेंटेड है, क्यों थर्ड वर्ल्ड की डिजीजेस हैं, थर्ड वर्ल्ड की बीमारियां हैं, उन पर रिसर्च नहीं हो रहा है, क्यों उनके टेस्ट नहीं हो रहे हैं। इस पर भी सोचने की कोई जरूरत है। जहाँ तक कंज्यूमर का है तो ने कहा कि कंज्यूमर ऐसा तो नहीं है ना कि आप सब्जी खरीदने जा रहे हैं तो आपको लगा कि आलू आज महंगा है तो गोभी ले लो, कोई वैल्यू ही नहीं होता है।
यहाँ दो लॉजिक होगा, पहला, it's question of mass education, and more important, there are certain areas where public sector has to intervene in every situation. I think. Right. Sir, my point is, why are we so much worked up about this Dunkel agreement? No, for instance, your own logic.
Public sector would not be allowed to decide anymore. I mean, you are saying that in certain cases public sector should decide, but in Dunkel text, in the whole range of things, public sector would not play any role at all.
In fact, that is the point which Mr. Dubey had made 3 or 4 times about the lack of the provision for compulsory licensing. Compulsory licensing would provide for a situation where supposing there is an epidemic in our country of a particular flu, then in order to combat that, if a patented drug exists, we should be able to force that company to produce here or open that patent to any other producer, including the public sector. But that situation is not provided by the Dunkel Draft. It is provided by our Indian Patents Act.
मतलब मैं एक चीज ये भी कहना चाहूँगा कि बात यह है कि जैसे कि एग्रीकल्चर प्रोटेक्शन है, अब गैट में एग्रीकल्चर प्रोटेक्शन बिल्कुल आबाद रूप में और असीमित रूप में उपलब्ध था विकसित देशों में, और लोगों ने शुरू में ही उसका अपवाद कर दिया और अब तक वो लोग उसका, बल्कि यहाँ तक लोगों ने एग्रीकल्चर प्रोटेक्शन किया है। यूरोपियन कम्युनिटी विश्व युद्ध के पहले चीनी का आयात करती थी, बटर का आयात करती थी, आज वो प्रोटेक्शन के अंतर्गत वो चीनी का निर्यात कर रही है और इसमें लोगों ने 40 साल तक फायदा उठाया और इसके बाद हम लोगों को अचानक कहते हैं कि नहीं भाई आपको उत्पादकता बढ़ाइए और इसके लिए आपको जरूरत नहीं है कि इसको आप प्रोटेक्ट कीजिए। उसी तरह से पेटेंट, जैसे कि श्रीमती सुमन साहा ने आपको बताया कि इटली में और कई मुल्कों में जिस तरह का हमारा पेटेंट लॉ है वो पेटेंट लॉ 1979-81 तक था, तो उन लोगों ने जो इतना लंबा समय लिया है 50 साल 60 साल 70 साल तक इस स्थिति में पहुंचने के लिए, क्या हम लोगों को अधिकार नहीं है कि हम लोग उसका आधा समय उसका 1/4 समय?
I think sir, we should do a Japanese style of answer to this. We can't actually cry over the spilled milk. Maybe it was no inherent in the international order. Sir, you had initially mentioned that you are not going to speak about this damage control thing. How do you control the damage, which is inherent? It will happen. How do you control that? That was my question.
On the seed side, I would like to just bring to Dr. Saha's notice, and she might have something to add. As far as the seed in our state, for example, is concerned, or in India is concerned, the total quantum of seed which our state agencies are producing, as you are aware that breeder seeds are only produced by universities or deemed universities. Now if you don't produce breeder seed, no matter which seed you import into the country, that cannot be sold as certified seed. Now there, I do not see how the role of the university or the deemed universities would be eliminated, because they have already by far produced parent lines which are far more location specific than what any import of seed is going to bring about. We have been dealing with this matter of seeds in a matter of great detail in this state, and what we found was that barring in the matter of hybrid vegetables, where again those seeds which are being brought in are not given the status of certified seeds, so they are bringing it in, they are not being able to sell it. I don't see how, if we produce from our own parent lines, it has nothing to do with from the multinationals or Cargill and all the rest of it. I don't see how I can be prevented from breeding from my own parental lines and making it foundation seed and then giving it to my farmers. I don't see the contradiction of the two. The second thing to this I would only like to add is, in the hybridization, what we must understand is that, for example, in seeds of vegetables, like hybridization has taken place in a fairly widespread way. In our state, for example, it is not even a tip of the north. Hybrids really haven't come in. And paddy, which is one of the most important crops in this state, 57 lakh hectares of paddy each season, there is no hybrid seed. So, what the limit thing I am trying to make is that while no doubt it is true in of technology for biofertilizer that danger which you pointed out exists. But in seed, we are ourselves far ahead, that to think that somebody else is going to come to my parental line and sell me breeder seeds. I don't see the immediate danger, and that's why I put them to you. Whether your organization has also considered plans or has seen some that what I've already done, I patent it.
Statement about Andhra having a paddy. Andhra is releasing varieties of paddy which have been indigenously bred.
I beg to disagree. I was personally in Hyderabad to see that. That claim of hybrid paddy of Dr. Siddiqui is today only limited to, he talks of 80 to 90 quintals which he hopes to get on an average, and a few plots 100 quintals per hectare. Without using hybrid paddy, 1 minute Dr. Sai, without using that, he is asking to experiment with 10 quintals to succeed whether he has actually evolved with paddy. I don't take this claim yet.
You're bringing a discussion of apples into a discussion of oranges.
So, you talk on it. No, that is not Dr. Sai. You see, on this, I mean, don't compare my statement with apples and oranges, because I'm not comparing your statement with real noise. No,
I think you reply.
fine, but you think I should reply back in the same way?
Sure, you can.
Then we will talk of berries and
Talking
pineapple.
about apples and oranges is common parlance in the English language.
Sorry, I don't know enough English. Sorry.
A metaphor to describe when two unrelated subjects are attempted to be brought into the same discussion. What Dr. Siddiqu's claim is not being taken into this discussion. Even taking the hybrid rice question, you know that China has given its technology to patent. If we remain free of the patent system, whether Dr. Siddiqui has done it today or not, somebody else will do it tomorrow, we retain options to produce hybrid rice. Which options will be severely limited if you had to accept patents today, because immediately the hybrid holders would begin to operate, putting you at a severe disadvantage in developing your own.
Limited over what base?
If you will make it left. Number two, as far as the reality of breeders certified foundation seed is concerned, you will know and you are aware that the multinationals are approaching the patent and protection issue on two fronts. One is the protection for the variety, one is protection for a transgenic. The protection for transgenic is not even through a patent for variety or a product patent. There is no protection that you have in that. Basic about parent lines, applicable only to hybrids. And as you are aware, I mean, for varietal development, parent lines have no meaning. Parent lines, holding treasured parent lines, is relevant to the breeding of hybrids, which, as you yourself said, is roughly today makes for roughly 4 to 5% of what we use in seeds. It is not a matter of immense importance, whether it is of tomato or even sorghum. Pioneer has its own share of hybrid millets and sorghum. That is a very small. We are talking largely about the protection of composite varieties, not hybrid varieties. And the multinationals will operate at the level of transgenics and product patent. We have no system to counter. That does not touch the ground. They do their own pre-formation certified seed. Even in the instance of them being composite varieties and claiming patent for a variety as against for a transgenic, you will face a situation that they will start their own system when you are off in certified seed. After all, what is cargill? What has been called in Karnataka? A seed farm for cargill to do all three steps on. They want a seed farm of their own to produce, multiply and certify their own seed. So where the entrance to these companies mention that what is going to stop us? When Punjab Agricultural University has these varieties, University has these varieties, who bring invested in them, what is going to stop them from releasing that to the farmer? The answer to that is two things. One is the market. Okay? I mentioned very briefly that because the aggressive marketing strategy, marketing skills and marketing finances in Bhagi village in Muzaffarpur, cargill seed appear before Punjab Agricultural University seeds. So brand name recognition will be established just like for surf. Variety of zoo seed. Number two, if you're an agricultural scientist, you know that variety replacement is a very essential element of continuing viable practice. At the point of variety replacement, because of reduced viability of your public institutions, varietal replacement will take place increasingly to the varieties of multinationals and innovations. And that is how nobody will stand in farmer and to buy seed, but the market will be created in a way through these mechanisms. Increasingly seed available to the farmer, unless he's a very nationalistic farmer decides to starve to get the high guaranteed seeds. If those are the seeds that are most easily available to him, he will like to see. I think that answers most of your questions.
No, I think this is a matter of opinion. This is a matter of opinion when we talk of Cargill seeds. While I see the fact that STEM has an impact, but let's not forget that Punjab Agriculture University seed, what certifying India today is probably third, maybe even 1/4 of the new varieties are scientists. The kind of scenario which you are painting, certainly I can see it will go on to that point. But in the present context, both in hybrid variety or even the hybrid variety, in fact, I'm sorry, I didn't understand and I'm very sorry that I said some things in the manner I shouldn't have. But because I wouldn't like to feel that a colleague, I'm writing down somebody's achievement. But I would certainly like to say that it's too early for us to talk hybridity in the Indian context. With the Chinese, when you talk of that, they are asking for patent. They came to India, they spent a month going around Delhi, wanting to set up a collaboration with Indian group for the purpose of giving their technology in hybrid paddy. I'm sorry, I get carried away with this. It may not necessarily mean interested. But coming back to...
I'll make one basic intervention on the question of hybrid paddy. This information I have Dr. Swamin who is in China is unable to do any hybrid paddy technology because their technology for hybrids is under patent.
I didn't say they were giving it. They had a team from the Academy of Sciences in Delhi going around to find suitable Indian collaborators. Since our organization was being considered as one, this is why I came to know.
बड़े हाई टेक्नोलॉजी और बड़ी बातें होती है जहाँ द्विवेदी यहाँ मौजूद बनी। सवाल है कि हर बात को मुनाफा के तराजू पर सॉल्व किया जाए तो इंसान की अपनी इंसानियत छिपने में कमी हमको इतना याद है कि फूड एफिशिएंसी के मामले में हमारे स्वर्गीय प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने कहा था जय जय और गांव-गांव में इस मंगल पर रात को खाना छोड़ दिया। मुंबई और पटना जंक्शन पर भी आलू मिलता था देखो।